So instead of teaching you guys, okay, keep in mind, David Icke is controlled opposition. One of the things that he speaks to, an aspect of it, does reflect reality related to what you would probably have heard dressed up as the Saturn Moon Matrix. So instead of showing you guys the grassroots approach of how the moon is, usually referred to superficially as Pac-Man, how it fucking functions. Instead of showing you that, I'm gonna show you this. Because this has to do with superficial society and a bunch of superficial people who don't have a goddamn clue what reflects reality. They haven't begun the journey. So this is long. It's fairly long. And I'm fixing food. Here, let me rattle this off. So as it reads, and I'll show you the video after I read this. I said, by quote-unquote sign up, she failed to state an important word. Consent. If you look up the public transcripts of the Davos panel, and here, I'm off script again, a lot of people don't know this shit because people don't look at anything because people aren't thinking for themselves. I know that sounds mean and pretentious and like I'm on a soapbox, but if you go out the door, people don't have a fucking clue what's going on because they don't mean to, which is to say they're not invested, which means they're not fucking involved. That's why things are bad. You and I, we maintain one another's cageless prisons. We do our master's bidding. And most people haven't given that any thought whatsoever. So what I'm getting at is the Davos panel is the public forum. It's the flip side to what the Bilderberg group is. And usually you only hear about one of these because you and I are polarized and people don't have a fucking clue what's going on because they didn't look into it. All right, so the Davos panel, our masters openly stated that their goal was to give the masses numerous forms of communication in order to echo their narratives. And when I say narratives, I'm talking about stories. I'm talking about adult fairy tales. I'm talking about, in some cases, just like the David Icke Lesser Magic, which, again, David Icke is controlled opposition. Don't fool yourself. The way this shit works is bits and pieces sometimes will reflect reality. However, it will be packaged in such a way that it will mislead you and others and anybody else who repeats that shit. Take David Icke again for an example. You start talking about the Saturn Moon Matrix and you're probably going to start talking about space. And you're probably going to start talking about aliens. And you're probably going to start talking about a bunch of other nonsense. It means you color the information because you didn't look into something. You bought into it. Which means you are the fucking problem. And this applies to most people. Or at least damn near everybody to varying degrees based on what they're willing to repeat without thinking. Back to point. Where am I at? This is when people tune out. And I'm also, here, give me another second. Like I said, I'm cooking. There we go. All right. Where are we at? Forms of communication in order to echo their narratives. To what end, you ask? So that people do not know what reflects reality, and what they do rattle off has absolutely no bearing on reality. Case in point, you have dudes calling gals dudes and gals calling dudes gals. This is one of many examples. There's a reason why AOL discs were free. You get a free cell phone when you sign up for a plan, and why this platform, a social engineering platform, superficial people call social media, is in fact free. And people would question that. That would come up. But people aren't thinking for themselves. And you would realize that again if you chose to pull your head out of your ass and think for yourself. Most of the shit I want to rattle off doesn't come up. And I'm talking about just some of the superficial shit that people do not know. And it would if people were reasoning things out and truly challenging what they've been spoon-fed. Back to point. We are training the AI. I'm talking about using these social engineering platforms people call social media. We are training the AI, we are profiling ourselves, and most people out there are repeating our master's adult fairy tales. You click repost, the superficial slop that was spoon-fed to you in your feed, and you tell other people about these adult fairy tales, and they repeat it. Because it's sensational, it's fun. It's fun telling stories, doesn't reflect reality, but it sure is fucking fun. And down the line, we just fuck things up more and more and more. This would piss you off too. It's also absolutely fucking hilarious how stupid people are. It is. I mean, at the end of the day, all you can do is laugh because people aren't going to change things anytime soon. You want an example of that? I mean, how many people haven't heard me out this far? How many people already just dropped out? Oh no, he's barking at the internet. These aren't positive vibes only. This isn't cancel culture. I mean, a censorship campaign because he's challenging people to think for themselves. That's how it works. It's by design. It's divisive. What the fuck do I know? Where I'm at. Adult fairy tales. A prime example is the flat earth and the globe theory. In terms of narratives, our masters spoon-fed people. Each of those agendas dates back to something having to do with learning against learning. It was a campaign. You probably haven't heard of it. You probably won't be able to find much on it if you go looking, especially if you use Google, just so you know. And it dates back to the 16th century. The 16th century is when our masters started rolling out their plan, which is the great game. It's the long game. It's what they're talking about when they say the New World Order stuff. That's superficial in terms of branding. Just like Illuminati is as superficial as it fucking comes. That's why there's a Taco Bell commercial. And people still use it because people don't look into these things. The Bavarian Illuminati was disbanded. It fell apart. They did rise back up, and they created numerous splinter groups. The names of those groups you don't hear online because people are fucking stupid. It's that simple. Back to point, and you have to constantly spell this shit out because people aren't looking into any of this, and you don't find any of this in the truth community because the truth community is a fucking circle jerk. To appreciate that point, truth is the daughter of Satan El. Truth is the daughter of Saturn El. That's Mother Earth. You and I are made from it, I shit you not. Another name for that, if you still don't, you're still not on board with what I'm getting at, and I want you to look into it, don't buy into it, is Alice's Adventures in the Underground. Now, if you just heard that, you might have thought, oh, you mean like Alice in Wonderland? Yeah, because that's the original name of the book. And Alice is another name for truth. You're welcome. Back to point. Where are we at? So it dates back to the 16th century. Our masters poison the air, food, and water. We've been boxed into where we have to rent everything we need. Food, water, shelter, energy. Anyone thinking for themselves should have realized that our masters would not have left an outline that reflects reality for people to digest. More importantly, if they had, you could use it as a tool. You can't do that with the flat earth and the globe theory, because they are adult fairy tales our masters put in place for people to repeat, to thoughtlessly regurgitate. Dancing back to the earlier thought. If people were truly thinking for themselves, you and I would have put something in writing to protect freedom of speech in a digital format when our masters rolled out what we call the internet, a DARPA project, respectively. And then I said, for fuck's sake, because no one thought twice about that shit. Why are they giving it to us? Oh my God. Maybe we should rethink some of this, but no one did. As always, I'm long-winded. Just appreciate that most people you're going to bump into assume light has speed, and that's about the sum of things these days. And then I also took a screenshot of this other thing in here. Some dud said something like, why would the government be mixed up with a private corporation? So the comment I left is, the quote-unquote government is a private corporation. The Republic fell during the Civil War. And that's very important to know, and more important to look into. The Republic fell during the Civil War and was finalized in 1871 when the Organic Act created the District of Columbia, the bottom of the trilateral city-states. A better question is, why didn't you research before opening your mouth? And that speaks to everything else I've already rattled off. If you sat through this, thank you for sitting through this. Now let's play the video. If it works.
Believe that lawsuit would have everyone believe that any cooperation, any communication between social media platforms and the government amounts to censorship. But that is just not true. What the government is doing in many cases when it is flagging content that is already violative of social media companies' terms of service. We might like to think they are free speech zones, but we all sign up to rules when we sign up for the social media companies' websites. And those might be rules against disinformation. They might be rules against hate speech, child trafficking, sexual abuse material, what have you. We sign up to those rules. And the government then, if they find instances of violative content, they send it to the social media companies. The social media companies are under no burden to actually act on those requests. And in many cases, based on a study conducted by Stanford University, in about 35% of those cases, they took action. The other 65%, they didn't do anything. And a lot of times the action that they did take was just adding context, not removing the content itself. Communicating between the government and social media companies does not amount to censorship. The government has a right to communicate about its policies and a duty to protect the nation, to protect our democratic infrastructure, to protect public health and public safety. And sometimes that amounts to law enforcement agencies speaking to social media platforms.
Don't confuse democracy with what the Republic originally should have stood for and allegedly did. They're very different things. Democracy is a shade lighter in terms of fascism. Don't believe me? Look into it. Look up the Lincoln Memorial. Look at the symbolism. Look up the House of Congress, the symbolism. Behind the dude or the gal standing at the podium on the back wall, the symbol of fucking fascism. It's the symbol of the fasci. And that would come up a lot, and it would be very important. You'll hear controlled opposition assets like Jordan Maxwell mention some of this sometimes. Because again, it's lesser magic. They're telling you something. Our masters are telling you something. But then it's going to get clouded with a bunch of other shit. They're going to tell you about freedom and democracy. Which is a joke. It's a fucking joke. What people call freedom these days equates to slavery, debt slavery. You and I became debt slaves back in 1913. Officially. Chances are, if you're alive today, I mean, how should I put it? I was born in 81. So I was born a debt slave is my point. The other thing, what was I going to rattle off? There's something else she just said in here. In terms of it being violative and other horse shit like that. Many of the posts that I've been flagged for date back close to 10 years ago. Especially on Instagram. Which means quote-unquote information or media or what duds call content these days, social engineering jargon, that stuff was sitting on this fucking platform, Instagram in this case, all that time. But now it's being rooted out and flagged. Does that make any sense to you? You got to remember, when you enter into a contract, it's just like a conversation. It's a dyad. It goes both ways. So it's a breach of contract both ways. It could be argued and it could be, defended, but that's only if people knew what they were talking about and it was the overwhelming majority that stood up and drew a line in the sand for the sake of fucking free speech. But most people are buying into this shit. Most people are truncating their words. Most people are rattling off words that aren't fucking words. They'll talk about how it's an Orwellian, this, that, and the other thing, but just for the sake of having people see their videos, they'll say stuff like unalived. Because they aren't terribly bright, they don't have a goddamn clue what's going on, and they don't mean well. But as always, what the fuck do I know? And imagine what I could teach you. This is just superficial shit related to Seminar 8. What I want to teach you is some of the inner workings of how you and I function and where we are, what this is, and how absolutely beautiful it is. But I need people to be able to think for themselves and be able to be capable of reasoning things out. I've asked a number of test questions people are incapable of answering, apparently, because they simply haven't chosen to take that adventure. And if they do, I will teach you things you are not supposed to know.